All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming out to my talk today. My name's Adam Hogan. I'm a senior security engineer for CrowdStrike, though I'm not talking about CrowdStrike today. If you want a sales pitch, come on by the booth. We will hook you up. Instead, I'm actually going to be talking about pirates, how to stop them, and how that led me directly into the hacking back controversy. My goal here is actually pretty straightforward. What I really want to convince you is really nothing more than there is actually more to this debate than being all the way for hacking back. Everyone should be doing it, and absolutely nobody should be doing it. That there's actually quite a big space in the middle that we can and should be exploring. There are some problems that come with hacking back, and I'm certainly going to dive into them. But I believe there are ones that we can address directly and solve aside from blanket prohibition. So I actually started the research by looking into pirates through grad school, at least. I'm an economist and was looking into the economics of cybercrime. Now, looking into the economics of criminals is pretty difficult because it's very hard to get hard data on criminals for fairly obvious reasons. So it really led me on a historic search of what we did know about criminal organizations, and it actually turned up incredibly fascinating material about pirates because they were far more organized, more sophisticated, and progressive than I really anticipated a criminal organization could be. Now, that actually led to a couple different talks on that directly. But what we learned about our adversaries sort of pivots into how can we stop them. So looking directly at, okay, well, how did we stop pirates when they were this huge problem across the high seas? How do we actually stop the piracy problem? And one of the most common ways with what's called a technique called a privateer. Now, a privateer is somebody who is licensed to be a legal pirate, in a sense. Right? So what happened is you would get a letter of marque and reprisal, and that would entitle you to go after the pirates, or whoever. It would actually issue a letter of marque and reprisal for multiple reasons. It could be to target a specific pirate. It could be because your country is at war with X country, so you can go and take any other ships from country X. It actually played a massive, massive role in the foundation of our country. In fact, I'm calling out here from a historian, without the presence of the American privateers in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, the U.S. would have never been able to hold off the British Navy. So it played this tremendous role throughout our history. And of course, if that's something we can learn from, which was my goal originally, right? I'm trying to learn about how criminals are organized. By extension, how can we stop them? Well, the way we ended up stopping a lot of pirate organizations was by essentially licensing privateers. So is that something we can learn from? And of course, that leads me directly into the hacking back technique. Because if we are talking about a cyber privateer to the point where you can now target, go after a bad guy, we're landing into that debate, which is one of the most contentious debates I've seen in our community. Now, I want to go through the objections. I'm not going to be able to spend nearly as much time as they deserve, but my time is limited. So I do want to go through a lot of the major objections as to why hacking back is currently, well, at least mostly considered to be illegal, and why people think that it is, the problems we have with hacking back, and trying to address them. Now, the first and most often cited, okay, why you shouldn't be hacking back is that we're not entirely sure if it's legal. And it is a lot of gray area. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act does say whoever intentionally accesses a computer without authorization and thereby obtains information from any protected computer is in violation of that law. It's not super clear. In fact, if you ask the federal government, is it legal to hack back, they will say, probably. And that's as straightforward as anyone's ever gotten. Right? Now, there are authorizations in the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that if you are working directly with the federal government, then you're covered. And of course, we see that all the time. If you've seen announcements about botnet takedowns and things, then very oftentimes the private sector working with the federal government, of course, that's legal. But as far as whether it be legal or not for you to go after a bad guy and access their computer in, say, cyber self-defense, it's not entirely clear. But it certainly leans that way because of how vague the law is. Now, whether the law applies in theory is a little different even in practice, which comes down to the idea of, okay, well, would you actually be prosecuted? Even if the law does mean that. And a lot of people argue no. And in fact, here are some quotes from a former Department of Justice attorney, Bob Katnack, who says the government's relationship with the private sector is so fragile that the Justice Department would probably exercise prosecutorial discretion and not bring a case to avoid damaging those ties. Right? So from the law itself, we're not entirely sure if it's legal, and that's a gray area we should really address. And then, of course, if it is, it's not entirely sure the government would want to spend their time going after somebody who is actually trying to prevent crime, if that was the case. And to clarify, it actually goes on. Except for the reckless cases of hacking back that hit innocent targets, it would be odd and politically brave to prosecute an individual or organization engaged in the practice without also prosecuting the offender who hacked first. The cooperation of the initial offender is needed in order to have an actual victim to build a case against the counterattacker, and that is unlikely, to say the least. Authorities may also be turning a blind eye to certain kinds of hacking as they need the help they can get against common adversaries. So again, it's going to depend a lot on who you're actually going after. If you're going after bad guys, the likelihood of the government wanting to actually spend the time going after you, to say nothing of trying to get the bad guys to testify against you, probably not that high. So we have a massive gray area. Now, let's say you are prosecuted. Let's say you're convicted. You could probably appeal. In fact, from a paper by Professor Oren Kerr of the George Washington University Law School, he argues that it would likely be the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act would likely be treated by courts as unconstitutionally vague. So the CFA is the law of the land, but because it's possibly because it hasn't been challenged. In fact, it's been argued that it probably wouldn't survive such a challenge if that was the case, because it's so unclear as to what the law actually means. Now, in addition to the Constitution boxing in that law, you also are bounded by international law. International law is actually, might have something to say about it as well, because some analysts would consider hacking back self-defense under Article 22 of the United Nations Responsibility of States for Internationally Wrongful Acts, which says the wrongfulness of an act is precluded if and to the extent that the act constitutes a countermeasure. So again, if it is in response to a crime, it does fall under different purview. So international law may have something to say about how we've defined U.S. law, which in itself, again, is quite vague. International law has also set up some precedences that our law has some duty to follow, including that of transboundary harm. In 1941, there was a smelter going to work, smelting, I suppose, in Trail, British Columbia, where it is spewing out all kinds of smoke, not only on its land, but across the border into Washington. And because it was, again, over the line between the U.S. and Canada, it goes to a international arbitration tribunal. And what that found actually set a very important precedent in international law, which is that a state may not use or allow its national to use its own territory in such a manner as to cause injury to a neighboring country. And furthermore, the tribunal found Canada to be responsible in international law for the conduct of the Trail smelter and held that it was the duty of the government of the Dominion of Canada to see that this conduct should be in conformity with the obligation of the Dominion under international law. So it doesn't directly apply to cyberspace, but if we're willing to make a fairly small jump there, international law actually says the government has a duty to stop people from committing criminal acts to people of other countries, so that we may actually have a transboundary cyber harm, and then if you're affecting another country's intellectual property, they would actually be found wanting for the same reason the Trail smelter was. Right, so the legal question is important. Now, should you start hacking back, tomorrow? Probably not. Because again, that is a huge gray area, but having that massive gray area is obviously one that we'd want addressed. It should be clarified, not just so that we know what the law is, but also to make sure it is in compliance with international law as well. Now, moving away from the legal side, it's also argued that it is a tremendous risk to go about hacking back. That you can make yourself a bigger target to the bad guys that are out there. That if you go poking around the hackers, you might actually be poking around a bee's nest, and you might not want to do that. And that is a really good objection as to why you should probably think twice about hacking back. It is a really good objection. I don't think it is at all an objection as to why it should be illegal. If it is a real objection, if it is a real problem, then it's kind of one that solves itself. I don't think you have to make it illegal to shoot yourself in the foot. Shoot other people, yes, but not necessarily yourself. So if we do have a problem of making yourself a bigger target, well, that is a risk you should consider, absolutely, before engaging in anything resembling hacking back. But it doesn't at all lead to the idea that it needs to be illegal. Similarly, it's argued that hacking back is not effective. Why do it? Is it really worth your time? You can't unsteal data. So what are you doing? That's a pretty good reason, again, why you should probably think twice about hacking back. I don't know that it's worth your time, especially from a corporate security standpoint. Is that really, how the company thinks you should be spending your time, their money? Probably not. But I don't see that has anything to do with why hacking back should be illegal. If it is the case, if it is not an effective use of your time, then you're not going to do it, and it's not a problem. Again, this is a good objection as to why any individual quite possibly shouldn't be hacking back, but it doesn't say anything as to why it should be illegal. Now, of course, one of the biggest objections when it comes to hacking back is the problem of attribution. If you're going to hack back against someone, because, well, who was it that attacked you? And that is not a trivial problem. Attribution is hard, a sentence that no one has ever disagreed with, right? But we do also want to be able to distinguish then between self-defense and retribution. So, taking again from international law, even if a conflict rises to a level of war, attribution does not seem to be a firm requirement, at least for the individual soldier in times of imminent danger. It is enough to know that a sniper is shooting you from a certain position without first identifying who the sniper is, which side he is on, his intentions, or anything else. Or in the hacking back debate, we'll often see this as the difference between being poisonous and being venomous. And this is a really clever metaphor. I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. I've seen it numerous times, though. But the frog is poisonous, and the chances of it hurting any innocents are nil. The venomous snake, on the other hand, can cause quite a bit of danger. Now, if you get poisoned by the frog, the solution is pretty simple. Stop eating frogs. That's on you, right? The frog isn't busting down your door and poisoning you. The venomous snake, on the other hand, is something you have to worry about. It can come after you. So we actually see this being addressed directly. And in fact, there is legislation that's been proposed. I'm sorry, I forget the congressman's name. Specifically making beaconing technology legal. The idea that if you've got a file whose whole job is to call home and let you know where it is, and you leave it on your computer, that it shouldn't be illegal to have a file that does that. Right? The idea being if someone breaks in, steals that file, maybe it'll tip you off as to who exactly the bad guy was or where they're coming from. The digital equivalent of a die pack in a bank vault, right? Shouldn't really affect anyone who accidentally stumbles in the bank. And if the die pack is going off, then the problem is you shouldn't be stealing money from banks. So same idea here with this beaconing technology. I think that's a pretty small step forward in legislation because, again, while maybe under the strict letter of the law, this kind of beaconing technology would be a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, as I sort of laid out earlier, I find it absurd that anyone would be prosecuted for that. But the attribution problem is by far and away the best objection as to why hacking back should be illegal. What if the bad guys set up decoys? What if they route their attack through a hospital so that if you're hacking back, you actually could be affecting innocent people? That is a massive, massive objection to hacking back. And why we would want to discourage people from doing it is a real objection, is one we absolutely need to deal with. And I'm not here to make light of this objection. What I'm suggesting instead is that it's a problem we can solve directly. Not just through blanket prohibition of hacking back, but one we can address. So, if I can be so bold, I want to summarize the objections, which are a lot of which fall into a couple of these real two categories. One, that not everybody should be hacking back. And I think we're all on the same page there. That's pretty easy. But the other one is that problems are possible. Yeah, maybe innocent people get hurt, and that what's really scary is that we could have anonymous harm of innocent people, that we're going to have hidden problems from this going on. The response to that, I think, is not to make hacking back completely illegal everywhere, but instead how do we influence these incentives? How do we design a situation, a system in which we can add responsibility and transparency? And maybe it's because my training is, again, as an economist, we're constantly thinking about how do we influence incentives? How do we structure a market, a regulatory environment in which we get the outcome we want? And in this case, what we want is accountability and transparency. So let's go back to hunting pirates and talk about how privateers work, because I'm certainly not the first person to talk about privateers in a cyber setting, or the possibility that they could be used to address the problem of going after criminals. But I have not seen people really dive into how this situation works. A lot of time when people talk about privateers, they make it sound like a little more than a bounty hunter, where it's like, okay, they're allowed to go after criminals. But there is a lot more to it than that. Privateers are required to work within the confines of a prize court. The prize court actually defines the rules of engagement for a privateer. Because if you want to be a privateer, the idea is you can go out, you can capture bad guys, and when that happens, you get to keep their ship and all the cargo on board, which is a huge, huge financial incentive. But you don't just get to capture people and take the ship home. You have to bring it before a prize court. You have to present your evidence as to why you think that was a legal capture. It goes to court, and the prize court has to adjudicate that decision before any of that transfer is legal. Right? So let's step through the process. So you want to be a privateer. You want to be a pirate hunter. First, you need a letter of marque and reprisal. So again, this is not open to just anybody. The prize court has to issue a letter of marque and reprisal, which will specify specific targets that you're allowed to go after. Maybe it's one person. Maybe it's a group of pirates. Maybe it's ships from a particular country. Whatever it is, that is defined in the letter of marque and reprisal that gives you the legal right to be a privateer. Next thing you have to do is post a bond. You have to put some money up front, because again, you might make a mistake. And in this case, you will be held financially responsible. So people that did want to be a privateer had to put some money up, put some money where their mouth is, so that in the event that they did something wrong, were found to have violated the rules of the prize court, they were penalized for it. So they were adding a layer of financial responsibility and accountability to the entire process. And then, as I said before, the prize transfer, where you are the officially owner of the ship you captured and all its cargo, that only happens through adjudication. And the adjudication process requires public record of the account. So you bring the ship in, you register with the prize court, and they post petitions saying, hey, we're going to have a trial. So-and-so captured this ship, and on this date we're going to go over the issue. So public notice was posted so that the owners of the ship, or people that knew the people who own the ship or that are on the ship, could actually come and say, no, they're not a pirate, or this is a misunderstanding and here's why. Right? So this was a very public process. The court then went on to question all the people on board. So they go through, they talk to the crew, they'd interview them, they write down all of the answers to their questions, which is great. You can actually go through and read all these. These are still a matter of public record. So you can go through the court's opinions, decisions, as well as the interviews that have been collected by the individual sailors who were interviewed by the prize courts about their recollection of the events. So, and by the way, the privateer had to put forward the fees to do these interviews. And if they didn't speak English, they had to hire a translator to get that. So again, the privateer has skin in the game. You know, if they do something wrong, it's not like, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have captured you. No, they're going to be penalized, and they have to put some money up front to make this happen in the first place. They're also held responsible for the ship while it's in this gray area. When you capture a ship and before the prize court actually says that it's yours, it exists very much in a legal gray area. And during that time, the privateer was wholly responsible for the situation. And now this is actually read from a decision called the Marianne, named for the ship that was captured. And this is actually written by Lord Stowell, who apparently, if you are a British lawyer, is a really big name. But he actually wrote most of the major precedents for prize courts. And in fact, his decisions are recognized by American prize courts. So it sets the precedents for our own admiralty courts as well. Anyways, that after maritime capture is replaced, the possession of the captors is in law regarded as bona fide possession, and they are not responsible for any loss or injuries resulting from mere accident or casualty, but they are only bound for fair and safe custody and are liable for any loss occasioned by their neglect or want of proper care. This responsibility attaches to loss resulting from misconduct of any of the agents employed by the captors as the prize master or prize crew. Neglect is not employing a pilot, etc. In cases of gross misconduct on the part of the private captors, the court will decree a revocation of their commission. So you can actually just lose the right to be a privateer in the first place. And that really set the tone. They also go on to say that you are completely responsible for it, and that after you've captured it, you can't go messing with it. So you've looted the ship. You see all the stuff in their cargo hold. Well, it's not quite yours yet. And if you go looting it, that you're actually in violation of the prize court's rules. And it's laid out again in decisions. La Concordia, the Washington, Clerk's Praxis, and the Maria all set the precedents that if you're going to be a privateer, there is that legal gray area I spoke of, and you are wholly responsible for it. And if you don't like the British take on it, here's Benjamin Franklin saying all the same things. And I'm not going to go through it. I just want to point out that while I was quoting this Lord Stowell from the English courts, these same principles do make the foundation of the American system as well. Now, I want to go through some case studies, because again, these are all part of public records. You can actually look at some of the cases that go through the prize court and demonstrate how the process worked. So in the case of breaking bulk, which is actually where you bust into the cargo before it is legally yours. So the mate of a Swedish vessel called the Falun, which is apparently named for a city in Sweden. I had no idea last time I gave this talk. An anonymous stranger who watched it on irongeek.com reached out on Twitter to let me know that Falun is a city in Sweden. Which was random and awesome. So thank you, internet stranger whose name I forgot. So the Falun was actually jointly captured by the Liverpool packet and the Retaliation. They went on to accuse the Retaliation's prize master of allowing the crew to break into the cargo. And to quote from their testimony, said they were stuffing their jackets so full that they appeared almost as big as a hogshead with their coats buttoned around them, which is big, I guess, right? So they're just looting, they're just stuffing their shirts full of all the stuff on the ship before they've made it back to the prize court. So before they have full and complete legal control of the prize they've captured. And when they protested, they actually said, like, you're not allowed to do that. They were told that if he did not hold his tongue, he would put him in irons, calling him a damn rascal and many other opprobrious terms. They're very polite in these things. But the court went on to restore the Falun because the rules were broken, because they got into the loot before they got back to the prize court. They ordered the captors to compensate the owners of the Falun for 2,000 pounds for lost damages and plunder. If they hadn't broken into the cargo early, they would have taken complete possession of the ship and all of its cargo. It would have been theirs a few days later. But they didn't follow the rules. It's up to them to be responsible. It is up to them to respect the decision of the prize court, and if they don't, they were punished for it. Because the rules of the prize court, keeping that process accountable, was the primary concern of the prize court, not just getting these people captured or allowing people to loot these ships. And they had to maintain integrity. They had to bring it back to the prize court, and only then was it fully there. So take instead the Scottish whaling ship, the Wraith. It was captured by a French privateer. They removed all the crew from the Scottish ship except for the captain and the mate, and they put on a prize crew of 16 Frenchmen. The Frenchmen then discovered that the Scots had some whiskey on board and broke into it that night and enjoyed it a great deal. They went on to pass out throughout the night watch into a small fishing boat over the side of the ship. So up come the Scottish captain and mate, who have just been captured on their own boat, and discover that more than half of their captors are drunk in a boat on the side of their ship. What would you do? They cut it loose. So they cut the loose. Half the French guys are now floating down. They go through and they nail shut the door to the crew cabin where everybody else was sleeping. They take their boat back. And it's found to be completely legal. They take it back to a friendly port, and it's theirs. Because while it was captured under French law, and if they had gotten it back to a French port, it would have been awarded to them. That didn't happen. And without the prize court's decision, it wasn't legal. And again, the biggest problem in the hacking back debate is the problem of misattribution. And it was a problem for privateers as well. So take the case of the USS Constitution. Goes out on her maiden voyage, no less, looking for French ships. This is during the quasi-war with France. So if they can find a French ship, they get to capture it, they get to keep the ship, and any cargo on board. Great deal. So first capture was the Niger, whose documents all said that that ship was British. But then they go and talk to the crew, and they find out that the captain of the ship, one Georges du Petit-Thouars, was a French aristocrat displaced by the Revolution. So that's okay. The papers say that it's British, and the registration says that it's British. But did you talk to that frog? That guy was compiled in French. So clearly, this is a French ship. That's how attribution works. It's that easy, right? So they take the ship captive. They take it back to the prize court. The prize court goes through all the documents. These all say it's British. Your audio mind. They're like, did you talk to that guy? Yeah. That's not important. That's just the captain. He just worked here. The ship is British. So they awarded the ship back, and the owners of the privateer had to pay $11,000 in damages. So the system doesn't stop the problem of attribution. It doesn't solve it. It's still difficult. These guys had a decision to make as to whether they were going to consider that this ship was French or not. So it doesn't stop that problem, but it did hold them financially responsible. The people who were wrongfully captured were rewarded damages for their time and for their trouble. And all the other privateers now know, look, if you go and commit the same mistake, you're going to have to pay for it. So it doesn't remove the problem, but it does give us the opportunity to hold people responsible when those problems do happen. So within the confines of the prize court, we now have responsibility because, again, you have to come to the prize court or it's not fully legal. So the question becomes, is this a solution we can use? It worked for stopping pirates of the high seas, but is this something we can adopt? So can we create a kind of cyber admiralty court? Can we issue letters of marque and reprisal to known white hats, for specific targets? Maybe there's a particularly nasty spam network or botnet out there that we want taken down. Can we issue letters of marque and reprisal so that people can go after it? If this is the case, well, then we can staff admiralty courts to adjudicate the takedown. So it's not enough that you can go out and take down this botnet, but when you're done, bring us the evidence. We'll look through it, sign off on whether this is done responsibly or not. Now, the biggest single difference is that in the high seas, you got a boat, a ship. And this is a tremendous financial reward. There's a lot of incentive to be a privateer because getting yourself a ship is, in the 1700s, first class ticket to the upper class. That is a tremendous capital investment, having your own ship, right? And we don't necessarily have the digital equipment. It's not like, okay, if you take down this botnet, we'll let you keep their laptop. That's not quite the incentive as a massive, as your own, pirate ship, right? I guess the question becomes how do we entice people to participate in the prize court, right? It worked before because, okay, I can see you took a ship. There's a lot of legal record as to who owns these ships. So if you want it to be legal, you had to bring it to the prize court. So how do we get the good guys to say, look, you go ahead and take that down, but you got to bring it before the prize court, so to speak? Well, we can offer a few different things. We could offer immunity from prosecution. Maybe we can work this into law and say, yeah, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is a giant mess, but tell you what, you're cool if you bring it before the prize court. If they decide you did this responsibly. We could also offer press, right? There are a lot of people out here, obviously, and hacking back, by the way, is going on. It's not like it's not happening. And I have some stats later on surveys where people admit to it, at least anonymously. So it is happening out there. And of course, we do see the private sector willing many times to participate in botnet takedowns. And when the FBI asks people to participate they say yes. You don't actually have to pay them. So it's not clear that we have to come up with pirate ships for would-be privateers as a financial reward. But we do want to make sure we have an incentive to come before the prize court and present the evidence and convince hey, I did this on the up and up, and add that layer of transparency. But cash is always nice. Maybe that works as well. Maybe we have a financial incentive. Maybe we're all being plagued by this horrible botnet, and we passed the hat around and said, look, you don't like this botnet? Throw some money in the hat. And then we're going to say, okay, whoever takes down this botnet and brings us the evidence that you did it responsibly, you get the money. I don't know if that's required. I don't know how much money it would take. But we at least have the opportunity there to build the incentives to have people participate in this system. Now, there's still some objections I've anticipated. Of course, we've heard from discussing this issue with other people. First, am I just kicking the can down to the prize court? I haven't answered all the objections. I've actually just sort of kicked them over to prize court, who's going to have to answer things like, okay, well, who deserves a letter of marque? Who deserves to be a target? When is it okay to let privateers, off the leash and go after, and which bad guys are okay? What rewards are necessary to balance that incentive? And I haven't been able to answer any of those questions. That's absolutely true. So yeah, kind of. But I also believe that this system would allow for a discovery process. I don't know how much money it would take to incentivize people, but I also know I can't answer that question unless I give it a try. And having a prize court system will allow me to try, like, hey, anybody want to bring evidence to the prize court for the fun of it? No? Okay, how about for some money? And then we try it. But it allows us to have a discovery process. And when it comes to inventing new social systems, I'm not an intelligent design guy. I don't think you get all the answers first and then go out and implement it. You need a process that can adapt. I don't know how many people will be willing to participate. I don't know what the right rewards are. But if we had a prize court system like this, we could change that. We could try different levels of rewards, whatever it takes, right? But what's important then is that we have the opportunity to try out a system that could potentially add this accountability. All right, so say you still oppose the idea of hacking back completely. You don't think anybody should be doing it. It's not worth the risks, too many problems, we're never gonna, attribution problem will never ever be solved, forget poisonous frogs, et cetera, et cetera. If you hate hacking back, I still think you should support my proposal. Because again, hacking back is happening, and blanket prohibition doesn't necessarily stop that. And if there's one thing we should learn about prohibition, is that it doesn't stop people from drinking, it doesn't stop people from doing drugs, and it hasn't stopped people from hacking back. In fact, Tom Kellerman is Chief Cybersecurity Officer for Trend Micro, and a member of Obama's Commission on Cybersecurity, has stated publicly active defense is happening. A survey at a recent Black Hat revealed an impressive 36% of respondents had engaged in retaliatory hacking. So it is actually happening out there. So if your concern is that nobody should be hacking back, I think you still might want to consider my proposal, because this is also a framework to stop hacking back. You can get involved. You can participate with the prize court. You can increase the requirements to get a letter of marque and reprisal. You could increase the amount of the bond you have to post to be eligible, so that we do have a financial cushion to hold people responsible, right? And the higher you make that bond, obviously the more you're going to keep people out and raise the bar to being responsible. And you can increase the oversight to what hacking back is going on out there. Because we haven't stopped it. Some of it's just being hidden. Frankly, some of it's not. If you Google the takedown of Rocket Kitten, people were bragging about it. Yeah, we took down this Iranian government site. No one stepped forward to ask them to be prosecuted. No one admitted to that server actually being, yeah, that was ours. What you did was wrong. That wasn't going to happen. But that, again, is happening despite this legal gray area. So whether you're for or against, my proposal isn't that everybody should be hacking back. Again, my proposal is that we should look for a system that encourages transparency and responsibility. So really what I'm arguing is a little bit more than that the optimal amount of hacking back is greater than 0. I don't know how much it should be. I don't know how many people should be hacking back, or if it should be that common at all. I really don't know those things. But I think we should have a system that allows us to find that out. And that's all I'm really saying, is that if we do come up with a system that allows for transparency and accountability, we can explore that further and find some appropriate level. I don't know how common it would end up being, but I suspect it's just more than 0. So with this framework, I think we could accomplish that. And ultimately, I think we should regulate ourselves. I mean us as a community, and everyone in this room, and everyone who's part of the information security community. You are seeing rumblings on Capitol Hill about, okay, how do we regulate hacking back and all these things from the same people who are still trying to figure out what the series of tubes is in the first place. So anything we can do to regulate ourselves, we should be doing. I mean, just as a responsible community, right? We don't want to have to wait for someone else to do it. We're probably in the best situation to understand the problem and the potential solutions for it. And if any of that is interesting, the main sources I had to learn about the legal system and how the privateering system worked are listed here, or if any of the other particular legal articles or things are of interest, I have a complete bibliography somewhere in my notes if this is at all interesting to you. So with that, I've wrapped up my pitch, my proposal here. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take that. Here or offline, of course. I'll be around the rest of the day or at the CrowdStrike booth. Again, if you want that sales pitch, let us know. Otherwise, happy to take any questions about the privateer model or hacking back now. Yeah, there's a hand raised in the back. So the question is would this specifically benefit larger corporations? And I don't actually know. It's entirely possible to see that. I think like a large organization that has professional reverse engineers and things are going to be in a better situation to do that. But I don't see any reason why the gain would be purely financial. To look at the people who already participate in botnet takedowns and things like that, there's plenty of people willing to do those things for out money. I don't think the reward would actually end up. I did lay out the possibility of a financial reward. That's absolutely true. I don't think that's going to be the binding reward, just given how many people are willing to contribute to the security community for the good of the community or for the publicity, or to just say, hey, we did this thing, go us. Right? That's already happening. And I don't think whatever financial rewards we could come up with would actually trump that. Even as for like a big research team to be able to come out and say like, hey, we did this thing. You're welcome. Now, I don't know what the numbers would be. I don't know what the financial reward would be. So the 100 straightforward answer is I don't know, given the flexibility of the system. But given how many people already contribute to helping take down the bad guys out there, I don't see financial reward being anywhere near the primary reward to people that participate in this possible system. Does that answer your question? Mm. Don't know I go so far as a two-tier system of justice, in that, yeah, you're absolutely right that they would have a better case to get a letter of marque and reprisal. Being professionals, being that you can track them down, being that have a reputation. I don't know why it would be exclusively limited to them. I don't know how big the bond would be or how prohibitive that would really be. Or if that really would be like an insurmountable barrier, though it's certainly possible. But the idea now is to make sure we can hold people accountable. And if there's a better way to do that, one that's anyone can participate in, I'd rather go with that. But with this model, with the difficulty in keeping people getting people to opt in to this system in the first place. I'm not sure how else to do that. Yeah.
One of what you said about possibly large corporations and access to this type of facility, could possibly see a system such as like a financial advisor where they offer independent agents that work as a franchisee of a larger corporation that is licensed to trade stocks, buy and sell securities, that kind of stuff. So could possibly be a way that, to alleviate the concerns about large companies, access to this is small individual access to a kind of a franchise model where it's still oversight from a large, licensed entity, as well as responsibility, the large companies hold the bond, independent agents that are, acting on behalf of that.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I don't know who all would pay the bond. I'm not sure that it matters. If it's there and we have the ability to hold people responsible, I think that's what's important. I have no idea what the bond would end up being. If it's $5 or hundreds of thousands, that's obviously going to be a very different situation, but I'm not sure what it ended up being. Yeah, but you would see that adjusting dynamically as well, depending on who the target is. How easy they think it would be to take down that target, right? Yeah, you're doing it.
Do you see any, I guess what I'm seeing is the big issue with this as a proposal is that it's reliant on already something that is a cost. You're setting a bar. It's that marquee provider that you're trying to get skin in the game somehow.
Right.
Right now, I'm never going to come up with there's something else that could actually be the skin in the game. Because that's the only way I'm seeing it, that if there was a way to have skin in the game that isn't financially walled off, effectively paywall, maybe that's even important, that it's only available to those who have the money to invest. I guess that's what I'm wondering if you've seen any other corporations like this in every market.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be the bond up front. If everyone's there and accountable, if you're open, then you could always be held responsible later, right? The idea is the bond is there in case you do something wrong and have to be held responsible for it. Now, having the bond posted beforehand makes it easier. If people feel they know where to find you, or that you could be held responsible later, there's nothing says that it has to be posted ahead of time. So if you are transparent, if you are available, if people know where to find you, if your reputation is on the line, then you have skin in the game as well. So I don't know if it's money. I know that's one possibility. I know that's what worked in the past when we were going after pirates. Whether the primary reward is money, whether it's reputational, hey, this guy did this thing, that you're willing to participate publicly, that could easily achieve that mark, that idea of having some skin in the game. It doesn't have to be money. There are other ways to participate. That's just an example that has worked in the past as far as, okay, how do we make sure we can do that? It was probably more important that people put the money up front in the past because you could disappear, right? In the 1700s, you change your name and go to the next town over, you're gone, right? That is a little more difficult to do now, right? It's a lot harder to skip town. So it's entirely possible you don't have to put the money up front, that we know where to find you. And if that's the case, if you're participating in a public and transparent thing, then great. We're just in a situation where we can hold people accountable. And that's the goal, right? It's not that you have to pay money, it's that we need some way to hold people responsible, whatever that method is. Yeah, you can. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and if you're just going after script kiddies and if you screw up and the downside is someone on Twitter gets their feelings hurt, then we don't need as big a bond. Yeah, you're absolutely right? So the level of responsibility tied to it would absolutely depend on who they were going after, right? How difficult was it to do? who the particular adversary is. No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
The research that you went through, did you come across anything that made what, I don't know if this is happening or not, but I was curious to see if any of the software, security software companies out there, like Symantec, might be entertaining some variation of that kind, not necessarily just hacking, just some variant of that. Is that something that's maybe being talked about just to those companies?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, so like if you Google Rocket Kitten takedown, you see people bragging about it. Hey, we did this thing. And there's a few examples like that. Yeah, so it's absolutely happening. Some people are willing to roll the dice. Some people aren't under U.S. law, which is what I focused on entirely. But again, only applies to the one country. That's not everyone in the security community is in. So yes, those are absolutely under active, discussion, and you can find examples of that. Yeah. Well. Absolutely. Mhm. Right. Yes. I believe that's the case. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. No, that's two really good points, right? One, in today's financial world, it probably wouldn't be a straight bond. It probably would be an insurance policy. It'd be a far cheaper way to obtain the same goal. If you're worth the risk. Mhm. Yes, no, absolutely. And then, if we can, throw out the specific targets, I think that'd be a really good way to do it. There are absolutely, I mean, we don't always know, right? But there are cases where we clearly do. We have been tracking a lot of the same botnets for years, and there's no reason they couldn't be on a top 10 most wanted list. Yeah. Right. Okay. And yeah. So yeah, so if there was, hacking across national boundaries, could that escalate into a bigger? Sure. No, it's an interesting question. And it's a question I think ultimately comes down to if anybody in those particular countries wants that to happen. In international law, there are many, many opportunities to stop escalation. Right. So in international law, you can very easily say that border disputes or crimes across boundaries can be relegated as a frontier incident. Right. So there's actually a case, Nicaragua versus the U.S. It was 84, I want to say. I can double check my notes if that's at all interesting to you. But what I actually found was that there was a couple of guys got in a fight. They didn't know what side of the border they were on. And it turned into this issue, and it sort of escalated up because now their local police are getting involved. Then their country's governments are getting involved on this sort of fight that was brewing. International law has established that So yes, there was an international crime committed, but not on purpose because they actually didn't know where the border was. It's just a couple of guys. This doesn't have to become an international incident. And there are many safety valves like that in international law to stop things from escalating. Now, sometimes the people in charge want things to escalate. And for certain countries, depending on their legal situation, you can't stop that from happening. So it probably is like a legitimate concern, but it's one being actively addressed. And if that's interesting, check out what's called the Talon Manual. There is the International Group of Experts. I swear to God, that's what they call themselves. They write what's called the Talon Manual. It's now in version number 2, which is actually the application of international law to cyberspace, and it deals very much with how do these events escalate into international incidents, but very focused on like when does a cyber attack present justification for escalation to kinetic war. Right? When does that happen? And it talks about the important, like, critical infrastructure and all those kind of things. Right? Yeah, good question. But I should be wrapping up. If anybody else has questions, feel free to track me down after this, or come by the booth, as I said before, and I'll wrap up. And thank you so much for coming out today, and thank you for the questions. That was great.